Blinky Bill, folks. Yeah, more to come. So, you're in luck. Welcome to the Penny Stamps Distinguished Speaker Series. My name's Christina Hamilton, I'm the series director, and today I am thrilled that we are officially opening our regular season of talks here in Ann Arbor with Kenyan Afrofuturists, Osborne Macharia, and Blinky Bill and their friends. Yeah, we got more folks with us today than you know. I want to thank our partners for their support of today's program. Design Corps' Detroit Month of Design, celebrating 41 design events this month of September, so check out Design Corps. And the Charles Wright Museum of African American History, downtown in Detroit, check that out too. And Michigan Radio 91.7 FM. We hosted our very first event of the season, actually last Saturday, at the Charles Wright Museum in Detroit with a brand new partnership for the series, where we hosted these same gentlemen that we're going to hear from today. We're very excited about this new partnership, and so look for more to come in Detroit at the Charles Wright from us. In addition to the speaking gigs that these gentlemen are doing while they're with us, they have been in residence all week in downtown Detroit through our WIT residency program. And they've been working on a brand new project that they are going to talk to you a little bit about today, and you will see some of the fruits of their labor while they've been here in the city. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, who have no idea what the Penny Stamp Series is, quick word of explanation for you. The Penny Stamp Series is a program of the Stamp School of Art and Design, which looks to present creators and innovators as a way for our students to connect with the creative leaders of the day, both on the stage here and with the other folks here in our midst. We take place most Thursdays here at the Michigan Theater. We're always free. We function as an open classroom for the whole region and community, so all are welcome to join us always. We have a dynamic lineup of guests to challenge and inspire you this season. Their details of this are in our new season calendar, which is available in the lobby, so if you didn't get one on the way in, you can get one on the way out. Or you can find us at pennystampsevents.org, or join us on our Facebook page at Penny Stamps Series, and plan to be here most Thursdays. I have one event announcement for you today before we get going. This Saturday at the University of Michigan Museum of Art, right down the street here on State Street, we will be presenting another WIT artist residency project, The Speaker. This is an interactive installation by Greek artist Zaphos Zigoraris, who is here in our midst with us today. Welcome, Zaphos. The Speaker is an exploration of American protests from the 1960s to today. This is combining archival material that's been sourced from our Bentley Historical Library here on campus, and it will include an interactive soapbox where visitors to the installation are able to relive or rebroadcast past moments of protest. You can bring something to read. There will also be historical texts available for you to read, or you can communicate your very own message in this present moment. So join us and make your voice heard. This is a one-day only event this Saturday, September 15th, beginning at 11 a.m., going to 8 p.m., at the Museum of Art on State Street, the Sten Gallery, the big glass gallery outside, and your voices will actually be heard outside on the street. And there's going to be a very cool car there that it will look like you're standing on top of. So don't miss it. This project is also part of 90%. This is a campus-wide effort at the University of Michigan in leading nonpartisan voter registration. We want 90% of our eligible students actively engaged in voting, and voter registration will also be available on Saturday at the museum. Oh, yeah. Good deal, it's a good deal. Just a few thoughts on our season theme, turn. It's a long story how we came up with this, but it's also the longest definition in the dictionary, which was quite shocking to me. And you have to look at a proper dictionary, not online and not an abridged one, but a proper dictionary. The definition of turn actually takes 2.5 whole pages. This is evidence to its many uses and forms and perspectives. And after all, our planet turning in the universe is the only true constant that we have. So perhaps some of the best, most poetic words on the subject, I've thought a lot about this. Of course, the bird song, Turn, 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 I advise you all listen to it. But perhaps more poetic is Simple Gifts, which is a shaker dance song, which Aaron Copland famously incorporated into Appalachian Spring with Martha Graham when she danced that in 1944. And the key lyrics to that are, "'Tis a gift to be simple, 'tis a gift to be free, 'tis a gift to come round where we ought to be. To turn, turn will be our delight, till by turning, turning, we come round right." So I hope this season gives each of us a chance to take a turn, make a turn, so to speak. And very fitting here today, we begin the season with a look at Afrofuturism and these artists who are turning an age-old narrative in new directions. We will be having a Q&A today, not in here. This will be directly following the stage program. You can join us if you go out this theater, take a left, go down the hall, and right before the bathrooms, there's the screening room, another theater within the theater. Join us there directly after, and you can meet these gentlemen and ask them questions. Please do remember to turn off your cell phones. And now to give a proper introduction to our guests, please welcome great partner of the Penny Stamp Series, the Charles Wright Museum's Vice President of Public Programs, Charles Farrell.
Good evening, and I'd like, if you could, so that she can hear you, a round of applause for Christina Hamilton, the visionary for this great and exciting program. The Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History in Detroit is very happy to partner with Ann Arbor to connect this region. We're working not only with this series, but with the Cinetopia International Film Series out of the Michigan Theater, as well as the University Musical Society. We think it's very important to connect this region and in turn to connect the world around very phenomenal programming. I was deeply moved and inspired when I saw these artists that you'll see later today. And it's artists who are very important in our society because they have a way of visioning, a way of seeing reality in new and different ways. And it's typically the artists who are constrained by those who don't want us to see and to experience reality in new and exciting ways that brings the world together. Kenya, a very important part of the world where you have the founding of civilization. These artists are phenomenal. I still see the images that you'll see many days after. So I want to be very quick and introduce the artists. As an award-winning photographer, art director, and digital artist from Nairobi, Kenya, Osborne Macharia's visual and narrative-driven style, known as Afrofuturism, has been recognized internationally as a platform for discussing critical social issues such as inclusion, representation, gender, and elder abuse. As a commercial photographer, Osborne has been privileged to work with some of the top international brands, including Marvel's Black Panther. Yes, Marvel's Black Panther, Disney, Oprah Winfrey Network, Queen Sugar, Absolut, MTV, Volkswagen, Forbes, Guinness, and Mercedes. In 2018, Osborne was the first Kenyan ever to be selected as a jury member for the prestigious Cannes Lion Creative Awards and the ADC One Show Awards. Nairobi-based Blinky, Bill Salenga, collaborator of Osborne's, is a singer, songwriter, beat maker, which you heard, producer, TED Fellow, Red Bull Music Academy alumnus, and member of the music collective, Just a Band. On October 19th, Salenga released his debut solo album, Everyone's Just Winging It, and Others Fly Tail. Also here is Kevin Abraham, fashion stylist, prop master, set designer, and Andrew Magetto, director of photography. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Osborne Macharia.
Good evening, Michigan. Afrofuturism. It's such a complex and such a broad subject that it's so hard to explain. Like, we've not even figured out how to explain it. So I'm going to give you a couple of stories, 5 stories in particular, and hopefully at the end you'll have an idea of what it means. Cool? I'd like to bring on stage Kevin Abraham and Andrew Mageto, because it's so funny that when these events happen, we were the 4 of us in these situations. And Kevin is a stylist, as you can see. Andrew Mageto is a DOP. And we found ourselves in situations where we'd always find ourselves asking each other, yo, is this for real? And I also want you to help me saying the same words. So whenever you hear me say, yo, abra, I want you to say, is this for real? Can we try that? Yo, abra. Nah, I want that Michigan oomph, like, yo, abra. Thank you, thank you. So our first story begins in one of the slums we have in Nairobi. It's called Kariobangi, but in short, we call it Kabangu. That's like our slang. And so I remember one day we were with Kevin. We just finished doing a shoot for an NGO, and we were packing our gear. And as we were putting our gear into the van, there came this old guy in a bicycle. He looked like he was about 80 years old, but he was dressed like a hip-hop teenager from the 70s. And I remember looking at Abra and was like, yo, Abra. Thank you. And we had a conversation, and he introduced himself, and he told us he was part of a group called Kabangu. And so they used to be a group of 4 hip-hop heads in the 70s when they were young, but now they're old. And the thing is, they still wear like they used to. And so what they do is they go around the slums and they teach upcoming youngsters who are getting into hip-hop, and they teach them on the positive values of hip-hop. And so they teach them on values such as justice, equality, peace. And so he said, actually, he had one of the youngsters in studio, and his name was Blinky Bill. And so that's how we met Blinky Bill. And I remember it very well because when we walked in studio, Blinky was playing this music. And so they asked us if we could take a few photos of them, and so this is what we produced. And so my second story goes to a place called Magadi. So Magadi is this place in Kenya that's like a dried lake, and within this lake, there are different terrains. So there's a salty patch, there's a dried place, there are a few grasslands. And I remember we were doing a fashion shoot there one day. And so as we were wrapping up, I remember Kevo wanted to go for a pee in the forest, in the bush. And all of a sudden he comes back running. And I'm like, Abra, what's happening? And he's like, I've seen the most unique elderly woman I've ever seen. And I remember this woman was approaching us, and the first sight of her, I was like, yo, Abra. Good. And so the lady introduced herself, and she told us she was part of a group of women. They call themselves Magadi. And so these women used to be former female circumcisers, but they had abandoned the practice and taken up an alternative lifestyle, which was in fashion. And so they dress in these very classy, unique outfits. And what they do now is they take up young girls who are escaping early marriage, and they teach them on fashion, on printmaking, on modeling, and even training them for international runways. And so they asked us if we could do a shoot with them. And so these are the images we produced. So my third story, was one time we were with Kevo, we were scouting for a location, and our brief was simple: just give us a very industrial, rough-looking, textures. And so we got a tip about this former warehouse. And I remember we walked in and we could hear people just punching, we could hear like people who were training for a fight. And I remember all of a sudden we saw this person approached us. He was actually he was a short person. So he came to where we were, and I remember it very well because there was music playing in the background, and I could recognize it was Blinky's music, and this was the music that was playing. And so they asked us if we could, have a small photo session with them. So just to give you some reference, these people are what society will call dwarfs, but they hate being called that. So back home we call them people of short stature. And so we found out that they were this group of people of short stature who are actually fighters. And so they have an underground fight club, and it's called Nairobi's Underground Fight Club. And so they asked us if we could do a photo session with them. And so this is what we produced. Oh, sorry. Sorry. Thank you for correcting me. So I looked at Abra and I was like, yo, Abra. And so we had a photo session with them, and these are the images we produced. On to my fourth story. So this one happens somewhere far from home. This was in Nigeria. And Blinky and I had been invited for a festival. It's called the Lagos Photo Festival. So I was showing my work. Blinky had been invited for the closing event. And we were doing it was like the closing party, and we were having a good time. And I remember it very well because Blinky was playing this jam.
Girl screaming, do you want it, Tim? Player hating, saying, who the hell is him? I'm in the back, gleaming from all that Persian gem. Keep a bunch of pretty models. models surrounding Tim. I'm over capacity when it comes to making them beats. Me and Missy making y'all move y'all feet, making y'all dance and tango, make y'all bass get weak. That's only 'cause we drop a bunch of heat. That's what you're gonna expect coming from my group. Bunch of dope beats and a bunch of dope lyrics too.
I know Latinos, and even the gringos. Yo, check it, 1 for Charlie Hustle, 2 for Steady Rock, 3 for the forthcoming live future shot. 5 dimensions, 6 senses, 7 firmaments of heaven and hell, 8 million stories to tell. 9 planets faithfully keep an orbit with the probable 10. The universe expands length.
And I remember that night, we were hungry, so we came out of the club to look for something to eat. And I remember just right in front of us walks this guy who's smartly dressed and walking with a hyena. And we're like, yo, Abra. And so there was a bit of, language barrier. So I called an interpreter who interpreted for us. And so the guy told us he was part of a group called the Hyena Men of Nigeria. And so these guys were a group of, it's quite a big group, but they had focused themselves into a group of 3 gentlemen. And so what they do is the animals, they keep animals such as baboons, hyenas, snakes from the time they're young, and it's something that's a bit cultural for them. And so they said they had classified themselves as these guys called no touch'em. And so what they do is they go into the forest. So now both man and beast act as forest conservatists. And so they protect the flora and the fauna in the forest. And so they asked us if we could, accompany them to the forest and take a few photos of them. And so this is what we produced. And so later on, when we came back to Nairobi, we asked an illustrator to interpret the different animals, and so this is what he did. On to my 5th story. So this has also happened outside Nairobi. So we were in Somalia. We had been commissioned by a tobacco company to go shoot an airport. To shoot a couple of images. And one of the images was getting an image of the airport. And so we'd set up our camera, we were waiting for this golden hour. And I remember we had this loud plane behind us. Like we were facing the airport, then behind us was this big bang. It was like a very rusty kind of airplane. And I remember it landed, then out of the plane comes this old dandy. She's like a grandma, and she was smartly dressed. And so I turned to Abra and I'm like, yo, Abra. Is this for real? And so she approached us and she said she was part of a group called Kenya's League of Extravagant Grannies. And so what they do is, they used to be business women and politicians in the 70s, but they've retired. So now they travel the country in their retirement days, just looking stylish and enjoying themselves. And so they asked us if we could do a shoot with them. And so these are the images we produced. So this is the most important story. If you've been asleep the entire time, I forgive you. But this is the most important story. So everything that I've told you today, all of it is fiction. None of it exists in reality. Welcome to Afrofuturism. So Afrofuturism to us means it's an artistic repurpose of the post-colonial African narrative by using narrative, fiction, fantasy, and integrating historical, history, present culture, and future aspirations of people of color, and creating a different narrative of what Africa is known for. So that is our definition of Afrofuturism. I'd like to show you a couple of projects that actually got us started into this whole movement. And one of them was called Mashishio. So Mashishio in my mother tongue means spectacles. And we were colonized by the British. And for the longest time, everything we saw about our freedom fighters was always from the British point of view. Like we never saw anything cool, fancy, patriotic about the Mau Mau. In every photograph that we came across about the Mau Mau was them in concentration camps, them lying dead. And so we wanted to create a different story about what happened. And so we created this 5 unit of special opticians within the Mau Mau. And so what they did is they created spectacles that they could be able to see the enemy at night. And can you imagine how these guys looked? This was our interpretation. And so whenever people talk about freedom fighting, it's always from a masculine point of view. And we know that women are also involved in the freedom fighting process. And so we also created a project that was just specifically for women. And for them, it was about their hairstyles. And so we created a clique of these 4 very tough-looking women. And whenever they'd adorn this hairstyle, only the people in the village knew what it meant. And so each character had a different hairstyle. And so we created this group of women, and this is how they looked like. So to your left was the leader, and she was partly blind. And she had like this. So this is the image I'm talking about, this one. And so she had she had like a secret route mapped into the forest that only her second in command could be able to interpret. And whenever she would lead them into the forest, not once were they ever caught by the enemy. And the lady on the other side used to be the one who would carry the food into the forest. So creating such kind of narratives. She was the arms bearer, so she would hide weapons in her hair and go into the forest. And the lady at the very end was she was like the chief entertainer. So she had made this special mouthpiece that could be connected to speakers in her hair. And whenever the women or the men were coming back from the forest, she would be the one entertaining and leading the entertainment process. So creating such kinds of narratives. And I'd like to bring Blinky Bill on stage just to give a bit more about what he does.
Hello, how you doing? So first I'm gonna explain my name. I'm named after a cartoon that was shown when I was a kid. It's called Blinky Bill. It was an Australian cartoon. And one of my favorite producers is called Danger Mouse. I don't know if any of you know him. And I was just like, man, I also want to be named after a cartoon. Because sometimes African names can be very strong. And I might change it in a couple of years. But anyway, I was a part of a band called Just a Band, which was an arts and electronic collective from Nairobi. And we found each other in college. I was studying sports science. I wasn't very good at it. And yeah, the rest of the guys, one was studying sports and IT. Actually, 2 of them were studying IT. But we all loved music. So when we didn't have class, we'd all link up in this room and just jam. But it was mostly a concept band. And a lot of our influences were music that we'd grown up with. So Stevie Wonder, a lot of African music. There's a guy from Congo called Franco, some old Kenyan musicians as well. And we dropped our first project in 2008. It was called Scratch to Reveal. And then the next year we dropped a second project which became really successful. It's called 82, and I'm gonna play one of the videos just so that you understand what I'm trying to say.
La 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 la.
kamna mastasa sijaonekana aha chukua dakika kama tano uite mazima moto jutumeshikanare wakichelewa watapata tuni moshi imebaki juu maji haitoshi kuzima hii beat so smooth oh so nice play it twice have a good time.
Are you ready to just go? You got to give me something and I'll give you something back. Are you ready to just go? You got to give me something and I'll give you something back.
Give me 5, it's good to be alive. The sky, it seems so far away, but we know that we've been to the moon and back, and we're sure that nothing's gonna hold us back. Take it easy, say she can easy. Yeah, yet to me cheesy, watch and to easy. You make your points come up occupy. I need to keep my mind occupied.
Are you ready to just go? You got to give me something and I'll give you something back. Are you ready to just go? You got to give me something and I'll give you something back.
We gonna huff and puff and blow the house down to Nakamna Mastasa. Sijaonekana aha chukua dakika kama tano uite mazima moto jutumeshikanare. Wakichelewa watapata tuni moshi imebaki juu maji haitoshi kuzima hii beat so smooth oh so nice. Play it twice. Have a good time. Have a good time. Have a good time.
Are you ready to just go? You got to give me something and I'll give you something back. Are you ready to just go? You got to give me something and I'll give you something back.
Yeah, so that song is called Huff and Puff. And it's just guys in Africa who have a little bit of imagination, not really much of a budget, but just wanting to showcase our ideas. And that's always how we've operated. It's just we want to make sure that if I imagine that something exists and it doesn't exist in real life, then I'd love to see it exist one way or another. And I'm very driven as well by producers who make that kind of stuff. So that's a brief history of where I'm coming from. And my new project comes out next month. It's called Everyone's Just Winging It and Other Fly Tales, which is, yeah, a brief history.
Blinky. So Blinky has forgotten to mention a video. Probably he forgot.
Oh yeah. This video, we're gonna play like half of it, but it was the first viral video in Kenya, which we made with a budget of $70, and like friends just coming together to help us put it together, and it's a fun one. Enjoy.
Microphone check 1 1 2 now. Kiwasha nare madhare taonja vibaya. Sinat Desiba, Benko Tukatika, Distakiku, Skiza stories, charity, charity, nipple wings, nitty five, gravity, gravity, Zema. Kumshow ati life ni exam juu mtatupiwa sufuria na hizo ni aibu ndogo ndogo misipendi so nikikupita tao tao jua sio madharau rao Chichoko wax musea evacuate the area Chichoko wax musea nipe nafasi nikoleze kiasi vile sisi hufanya pande hii ya the tracks hatuchezi na kazi sipoteze wakati tumekunja mashati Chichoko wax musea evacuate the area Chichoko wax musea
So, that song changed our lives a lot, and right now in Nairobi, like when I see there's a lot more kids coming up and making electronic music, which is just so interesting because when we started out, there wasn't a lot of people messing with electronic music. And as Osborne said, it's like Africa is a continent that has had a lot of really great storytellers. And we're just happy to be a part of that. And it's like also just shining a light on everyone else who's gone before us so that the world knows that Africa is the future.
And our first collaboration with Blinky on like media platform was when we were shooting No Touch'em, the project with the Hyena Men. And so we did a short film. That's where the DOP and co-director Andrew Mageto came in. And we needed music for a film. And so we decided he'd give us the music, and in exchange, the film will become his music video. And so we produced No Touch'em, and enjoy.
Okay now, let's go now. Pull up, pull up, pull up on that pole, yeah. Bounce to the step of the beat, I got gold, yeah. Don't get too close to this, it might fold, yeah. Pick it up, put it on repeat, I told ya. People have power, they just do not know it. The people that have it don't want them to know it. I don't understand how we got this way, got this way, got this way. But I'm never gonna fit in, don't wanna fit in. Don't need a reason when I got my own rhythm. Never gonna fit in, don't wanna fit in. Don't need a reason when I got my own rhythm. That I told you Africa got swag. When I look around, people shop like that. Boom clap clap, boom clap clap, boom clap. When they go slow, look at us go chop chop. People that love me will love me for me. I don't need permission to be who I be. Oh Lord, mercy on me. Just wanna live until they be free.
Sometimes we don't need no melody to harmonize with this feeling that we want to express through this bass and drum. Allow me to talk, allow me to talk, allow me to express myself, allow me to yarn, allow me to yarn, allow me to yarn my thing, allow me to talk, allow me to yarn, allow me to express myself, allow me to yarn, allow me to yarn, allow me to talk, allow me to feel myself, allow me to smile, allow me to be, allow me to be. Waiting I supposed to be. Allow me to yarn, allow me to talk, allow me to feel, allow me to see, allow me to smile, allow me to laugh, allow me to know what this, waiting this is about. Said the other day, empty places make the loudest noise. Allow me to talk, allow me to feel, allow me to cry, allow me to smile, allow me to know, 'cause I want to.
And so we've been moving into evolving our style into more sort of experiential places. And so we've been trying to sort of like figure out what will an African gallery experience look like away from the European or Western style, which is always hanging artwork on white walls. And so we decided, you know what, we're going to create our own art experiences. And in these experiences, we fuse fashion, we fuse music, food, art, and we actually bring our characters from the fictional space and digital space into the real life. And so when you come for art experiences, you actually get to meet the models and take photos with them. So that's our idea of an art experience. And so one of the projects we did was called Gikosh. So Gikosh is short for Gikomba. Anyone who's lived in Nairobi, anyone who's grown up in Kenya knows about this market because it's one of the biggest thrift stores. There's a lot of garages. It's like one of the biggest in East Africa. And so we've always grown up seeing a section of Gikosh where they make a lot of metallic stuff. And there are always these piles of tin trunks and things made out of metal. But we've actually never understood why that is there. And this is actually how the place looks like. So it's either containers or metals. And so we came up with this story whereby, imagine underground, there was a group of ex-aeronautical engineers. And in this underground place, they actually built furniture. So this was a collaboration between us and actual guys, real people. Now this is for real. This is for real. So these guys who actually travel around Kenya, and they buy planes that have crashed, and they bring them back to their workshops, and they convert them into furniture art. And so this is some of the stuff that they produce. And so we asked ourselves, imagine the kind of guys who make this stuff. How will they look like? And so we imagined that under all all those piles of metal tin trunks, that camouflaged underneath is a bunker, that's a workshop. And this is where that furniture comes from. And this is how those people look like. And so this is the carpenter. And we also worked with someone who does motion, who animated the stuff. So we had these animations playing on the screens on the day of the event. And she's the Sanda. She's 107 years old. And so we had that animating. He's the engineer. She's the scout. And he's the welder. And for this event, we actually did custom-made passports. Those were our invites. Because we never charge for experiences. We want to engage with the public and expose the public to art in a different way that's sort of been segregated and excluded to anyone who wants to view art. And so we never charge for events. But we asked guys, if you want to come for this event, you have to download a free boarding pass. And so that's how the boarding pass looked like. And you'd bring it and it would be stamped. And I remember when we put it out on social media, we had a response of almost 4,000 people coming for an event. The first event we ever did, I remember we did it with Kevo, just the two of us. And we were given space at the French Cultural Center in Nairobi. And when they invited us to do a project, we told them, we have quite a following, so expect a lot of people. And they're like, nah, whenever we have events, we have 40 people showing up. So we'll give you 2 security guards, we'll have a couple of drinks, and shock on them, 3,000 people showed up. And so that's the kind of experiences we want to create. And so these were the regular boarding passes. So when you're given a passport, it had that boarding pass inside. And so the passport was a notebook as well after the event. And so this is how our art experience for that particular project looked like.
Flight crew, please prepare for takeoff.
Forgotten.
that's just a glimpse of the event. And on to the next stage is where we've been trying to collaborate with brands, because a lot of the campaigns we have back home are always ideas and creativity that's done outside the continent and brought into Africa and expected to work for a market, which sometimes never happens. And so we were so lucky to work with Absolut Vodka on a project called Africa is on Fire. And so they created these 5 superheroes, and I was fortunate to be one of the 5 superheroes. And so our power was our creativity and what we do for the continent in terms of changing the narrative. So we did a trailer for a movie that does not exist. And just to invite guys for this festival that's happening annually in Joburg, South Africa. And so this is the movie. The trailer, sorry. And coming into the project, I was given the creative freedom to photograph and create the visual style of the campaign. And so these are the images we produced. Because of time, I'll just dive to this part. Okay, sorry. So early this year, I was commissioned by Marvel to create artwork for the movie Black Panther for cinemas in London. And so we took the fact that theoretically Wakanda falls somewhere touching the northern part of Kenya. And so we came up with these stories of these three elders who were rescued by the king. And because they were exposed to the element vibranium, they became blind. But with that came special powers. And because of that, they were wise, they had a lot of knowledge and insight. They were taken in by the king into his inner court and became his most trusted advisors. And so this is how they looked like. And the leader was actually a woman. So these are the images. So Saiton in Ma, which is language spoken the Maasai, means leader. Koinet means the tall one. Kokan means manly. And that's how badass they look when they're together. So this brings me to the final project, and that's the reason why we came to Detroit. Not the reason why we came. We came because we were invited, but we were like, you know what, since we're in Detroit, let's just do a project while we're here. So we've been doing a project called Remember the Rude Boy. And so this project is all about remembering the forgotten people in society who've always had an impact, but has been sidelined. And so we began in Nairobi, and it was after the passing away of Kevo's dad. We decided to do a project that honors people who've been a significant part in the fashion industry, especially within the thrift market, batik making, tie and dye process. And so we created Remember the Rude Boy, Nairobi. And so this is how the gentleman looked like. And after that, we went to Ghana, Accra, and we did Remember the Rude Boy, Accra. And it was about remembering the guys who work in one of the largest electronic dump sites in Ghana. And these people go through a lot and also forgotten by society. And so we decided to do Remember the Rude Boy, Accra. The dump site that you see is called Agbogbloshi, which is one of the biggest dump sites within the western part of Africa. And so this is Remember the Rude Boy, Accra. And then we come to Remember the Rude Boy, Detroit. And with us, some of the gentlemen who took part in this project. Could we have the lights on, please? I'd like to shout out to the men who helped us in doing this project. So we decided to honor African-American war veterans who've been forgotten by society. And so, guys, may I ask you to stand up as we honor you? So the gentleman in a hat is called Art, A-R-T, short for Arthur. Thank you, Arthur. And we have Bobby over there. And I'd also like to share a special thank you to everyone, for the crew in Detroit who also came to be with us. May you please stand up, the crew from Detroit as well. So these guys went far, like they went above and beyond to help us in doing this project. Like from the bottom of our hearts, we say thank you. Thank you for everything. And we have not finished. It's a process, it's a project in the making, but this is some of the visuals that we did. So that is Art, who was a war veteran in the Vietnam War. So that's Greg, who was a military police in Honduras and Grenada. That's Daryl, who was in the Gulf War. And that's Bobby, who was in the Korean War. And I just wanted to show you this image because this sometimes happens where you go onto location and we were actually shooting it yesterday, and the weather just did not cooperate. So in such situations, I'll try bring the lights as close as possible to the subjects, then also take another plate of the background, and then merge them together. And ladies and gentlemen, we want to say thank you.